So thank you all for coming. All right, so we're going to start at the beginning of what is LGBT, because that's the crux of a lot of this discussion. So you've all seen this. It's the pride flag. And each one of these stripes, originally there were 8 stripes, now it's down to 6. Mostly, the stories are different depending upon which story you listen to. 2 of the colors were hard to get for material, so they cut those off. But each one of these stripes means something, and I don't know what each one means. It's just, health and happiness and stuff like that. But how many of you have ever seen this flag? And I see people shaking their heads saying, no, I've never seen this flag. So what this flag is this is the flag for transgender. Okay? So it's obviously got some obvious parts to it. The boys, the girls, and then the white ones. So what does the white one represent? And the white one, even the person who designed this flag isn't quite sure what the white one is for. It's for kind of whatever you want. Is it for the people who are transitioning and are halfway? Is it for the people that are intersexed, so people that are born with both sets of genitalia? Is it born, what is it? What does it, and it doesn't really matter, okay? The other thing that you'll notice about this flag is it doesn't matter how you hang it, right? It's always the same. So you could hang this flag diagonally or however you want, but the flag is always the same. And that was on purpose, because no matter what you consider gender to be, it is correct. And that's the story behind this flag. So this is the transgender flag. And if you watch pride parades on TV, or even if you go, you'll find that there are a lot of people wearing this type of thing, this direction or whatever. And that's what this flag is for. Most of the LGBT groups have their own flag, and they all have different meanings and purposes. The rest of today is just about me. Now, what I'm going to talk about is me. I know my story. My story is unique to everybody else's story. I have a lot of trans friends, as you might imagine, and their stories are very different. Mine is very positive. Some of my trans friends, they're not very positive. It's no fault of their own. They've had a lot more struggles than I have. So we're going to start with a simple chart. And I promise not to do this a lot. Okay, so I put 30 hash marks there. For me, each one of these hash marks would be a year of my life. So there is no condition of transgender. You'll never find it as a diagnosis anywhere. It doesn't exist in the guides of medical journals. They don't talk about being transgender. What they talk about is a condition called gender dysphoria. Dysphoria is a sustained long-term discomfort with whatever. So I've had a long-term discomfort with my gender. Now, when did that start? I am now 50, about to turn, how old am I about to be? It's 57, thank you. I'm about to turn 57. The years, they go by so fast. About to be 57. But when I was 4-ish, I went up to my mom and I said, Mom, was a mistake made? Am I supposed to be a girl? I talked to my mom about this for a bit. Lasted maybe a minute. This is 1968, 69. What would you do if your 4-year-old came up to you and asked you that same question, right? And the answer is, well, you're going to say, no, a mistake wasn't made, go out and play. So in the back of my mind, I'd always think, damn, you should have been a girl. You wish you were a girl, whatever. Now, there are different levels of discomfort. Some people are mildly discomfort. Some people have extreme discomfort. Mine for 50 years was pretty mild. I was never dissatisfied that I was born a guy. I never felt like I was trapped in a guy's body. That was never a thing for me, where some people are. Now, for those that are here, you've heard over and over and over again, oh, they were just a woman trapped in a guy's body. That was never me. And that's all I ever heard. So I thought that to be transgender, you had to feel as though you were a girl trapped in a guy's body, or the other way around, okay? And that didn't apply to me. So I couldn't be trans. So over the next couple of years, and I mean really just a couple of years, 4, 5, 6, I would try to play with the girls in a like a birthday party. I remember Patty Lowhouse. I went to one of her birthday parties one time, and there was a bunch of boys and a bunch of girls. And the girls went off, and I have such a clear, distinct memory of this. It's amazing. The girls went around the back of the house over by the patio, and they were doing something, and I wanted to do whatever they were doing. And the boys were doing something, and I didn't care. And I go over to play with the girls, and the girls say, oh, go away, boys have cooties, or something along those lines. And that was one of the things I think that solidified in me, all right, you got to play at the hand that you were dealt. So over time, I always did the boy things. Fast forward a little bit through high school, middle school, when all the girls were starting to develop and blossom, I would do things like the girls' drill team. They practice out in Commons 3 after school. And I would walk through the Commons, and I would go through and I would steal a rifle and I would twirl it. And I was actually pretty good at it, considering I never had any practice. I'd give it back and I'd keep going. Or I'd steal a flag and I would, whatever. It just made me feel good. All through high school, I was doing all these little things that were considered girly. But I never really associated what I was doing with a deep dissatisfaction with gender. I get married to a lovely girl in 1985. We have 2 kids. We were married for 30 years. There's a lot that happens in there. And all that happens in there, the dysphoria is doing this. It's going up slightly, but not too bad. Because life is busy, right? When you're in your 30s and your 40s, that's when the kids are whatever. Pick a sport. I was my son's ice hockey coach from the time that he was in 2nd grade through high school. Okay? I had never played hockey in my life. That was a crash course is what that was. And I was okay. I did a lot of puck shagging, and I didn't do a lot of coaching, but I knew when to open up the door, and I knew when to yell at the kids when they screwed up. And so, and compliment them when they did well. And so I did that, and it was just busy, and it just kept me busy. Then all of a sudden, both my kids graduate from high school. They go off to college. I actually start riding a bike. And as it turns out, it was an escape, the bike riding, just from being sheer boredom. So I started doing long distance biking, and then ultimately I ended up doing the Anchor House ride, which is 500 miles over 7 days. And it was a great experience. But what had happened during that time was all this idle mind time started doing one of these numbers on me. And you can see that there's a slight increase there. And it didn't take long before I realized this is going to be a problem. My just being uncomfortable. Now, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant at the time that I was going to be have pronounced discomfort. So I went back and got my master's degree. I go back to DePaul in Chicago. That's where I'm living. And I graduated with a 4.0 out of my master's degree in computer science. So all during that time, the dysphoria went down a little bit because I was so busy. I graduated, and then things started going back up a little bit. Not too much, but just a little bit. And then one day, so you asked, was there something that tipped me over? It happened one day. My wife, who is at the time my wife, now we are divorced, she went to a wedding in California that I couldn't attend for probably business reasons. And she's a big family. and her brother had asked her why she didn't seem so happy-go-lucky and cheerful. Whatever happened to the little girl I grew up with? And she relayed that question to me, and that's what started the whole thing, right down or right up, however you want to look at it. Because I started thinking, why am I not so happy now? And at that point, literally one day, this takes a huge jump. And I start thinking more and more about my gender and how not uncomfortable I am as a guy, but how much I really wanted to be a girl. There's a huge difference there. I was never mad that I was a guy. I was mad I was not a girl. Does that make sense? I mean, it's subtle, but for me, I was never upset that I have a male body, but I just wish I didn't. It's kind of weird. So it gets really bad to the point where in October of 2015, I was coming out for my high school reunion. And on the Wednesday before I come out, or it may have been Tuesday, but it was a couple days before I come out, I call my sister, and I stay with my sister when I come back east. She's wonderful, thank you. And and we always go through a little schedule. And we go through, these are the meals that I'll be there, this is when I'm going to arrive, this is when I'm going to leave. It's basically, just this is when you can expect to see me, and if you have things to do, then we hash out our schedule and we're done. So we're talking on the phone, and right before I hang up, I said, oh, by the way, I've got something I've got to talk to you about. It's very important. Do not let me not talk to you about it. Click. I kind of half expected a phone call back, but it didn't come, and I was like, all right, that's good. That's good. I hope she understood I have something that I want to tell her. So 4 or 5 days later, however much further later, I'm driving from Chicago to Trenton, Ewing. And as I'm driving along, I'm getting more and more nervous because I know she's going to ask me, and I've not talked to anybody. I'm 50-something years old. And since I was 4, I have not mentioned any of this to anybody. This has been in the back of my head. This is my dirty little secret. We all have a secret that we're going to take to the grave, and this is the one that I expected to take with me. And now I'm going to let it out. So as soon as you tell somebody a secret, it's no longer a secret, right? So I'm nervous. Now, it's very similar stories to people who are gay or lesbian, and they come out. The blood pressure goes up, you start to sweat, you start to get nervous. Are they going to reject me? This could be the first day of the end of my life, theoretically. So I walk into the house. Hi, great, hugs and kisses, whatever. And my sister says, hey, I need to run to the grocery store because I forgot something for making dinner. I don't remember what it was. And so come with me. So we get in the car, and about the time I go click, she says, out with it. It's like, okay, you did hear me, didn't you? Damn it. So I start describing these feelings, just feelings, because I have no names for this. I don't know what to call whatever I'm feeling. I didn't even know that there was a name for it. Okay, so and after a while, like the next day or that evening or something, I had gone out, and I think it might have actually been to the high school reunion. When I came back, she says, come here, read this. And what she had found on the internet was the clinical definition for this thing that I'd never heard of called gender dysphoria. And on this site, it was like 10 checkboxes. These are the symptoms of having gender dysphoria. And I went down a list and said, yep, nope, yep. Oh my God, this is a thing. Okay, the nope was you're unhappy with your current gender. You're unhappy with your body or whatever. And time will tell whether that was really the case or not. But I was like, this is a thing. Now it does that because I can name it. I've got a name for what I'm feeling. So if there's a name for it, that means somebody's doing research in what is the solution and what's the pill I take. This is the pill society, right? What's the pill you take? So I drive back home with this knowledge of, hey, I've got this thing called gender dysphoria. What does it mean? So I was doing research for the next 2 weeks. And one day I was out raking leaves. Now, my ex-wife runs the local golf courses and the local ice rink. They're community rinks and community. So when one ends, the other one starts. It's a very synergetic, if that a word, good synergy between the two positions. It works out really well. And she was closing the golf courses and opening the rink one Saturday, and I was outside raking, and I couldn't take it anymore. I literally just sat down in the lawn and just started to cry. It was just so overwhelming. So when she came home, she's like, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And I told her what we had found out and all the research that I had done. And her first question to me was, "Does that mean you like guys?" So I'm going to take a little side note for just a minute. That was the exact right question to ask. That's what she should have asked, okay? She's my wife. Am I no longer interested in women? And the answer is gender identity and sexual orientation are two completely different things. They are not related to one another, okay? I am and probably forever will be, as I word it, as I do things, I go in with both feet. One on the T flag, one on the L flag. So I am now an L and a T at the same time. And a lot of people do that. Some people change and their orientation was always the other way, but we're always afraid to admit it. I've got some friends that all of a sudden are very much interested in guys. And if you talk to them about their history, and you just kind of listen to the words that they're using, not what they're saying, but to how they're saying it, they've always been interested in men or the other way around. So that was her first question, and I don't blame her at all. And I probably would have asked the same question in the other direction as well. So, we talk about it and whatever. So I start to go see a therapist. And the therapist had a couple of letters after her name. I don't remember what they were. And she kind of confirmed that, yeah, you've got this thing called gender dysphoria. Because the one thing that I do when I went into the therapist the first time, I don't say why I'm there. I'm just there, I just have some troubles and I want to talk through them. So I start talking about my life and all this stuff. And at the end, at the third or fourth session, she's like, "Yeah, you did a good job with not doing my diagnosis for me." Because some people just walk in and say, "Hi, I'm transgender." Okay. And I just walked in and said, "Hi, I'm having some mental problems. I just want to work through them." And so she said, of everybody that she's ever counseled, I was one of the fastest that she could ever figure out what was going on. And it was, again, not what I said, but how I said it that actually led her to the diagnosis. So I saw her for, 2 months. That would be about right. About a month and a half, in fact. Because my daughter came home from college, and my ex and I, we talked, and we said, okay, we're not going to talk about this while the kids are here. Let's figure out what's going on. So I didn't go to any more therapy and whatever. My son was home until late January because their school had a longer break, and so he was around for a long time. So we couldn't talk about it. We couldn't do anything. When he went back to school, I was tied up so tight in a knot that no matter what anybody did, it was wrong. What do you mean you walked into the room with your left foot first? I mean, it was that bad. And we were going to go on vacation the first week in February. And the day before we left, she said, "We have a choice. We can go on vacation tomorrow, or I can file for divorce tomorrow. What's your choice?" I said, "Let's go on vacation." So we went on vacation, and it helped get, busy minds, because you're busy on vacation because you got things to do, whatever. So I calmed down a little bit, but we talked a lot. Okay, we did a lot of hiking and a lot of camping. And one of the things that we did while we were camping was, we were hiking up, it was just a minor hill in California, and we were walking up this hill, and another couple came back down the other direction. We walked past, and they're far enough away that they can't hear us talking anymore. And I said, okay, let me ask you a question. Describe the two people that just walked by. She said, I don't know, guy and a girl. I said, how old? She said, I don't know, 30? I said, okay. So I could tell you every single thing that the girl was wearing. Okay, I could tell you her hairstyle. I could tell everything. And she's like, oh my God. And I said, that's what I notice about everybody. Every woman, girl, doesn't matter, that walks by, I'm not checking them out. I'm checking them out the same way that women check out women. You know, ooh, those boots don't go with that shirt. You know, whatever, right? Okay, and I would take notes. And it dawned on her, okay, maybe that's why, you know, you can pick out the right shoes for this outfit that I'm wearing. She always comes in and asks which shoes, or does this match, or whatever. I would be able, just like that, and I would say, no, go try out the blue one instead, whatever. And it was eye-opening, that trip to her. So she understood now better what I was going on. The other thing that we found out, how do you answer this question? Think, how would you answer this question? How often do you wake up in the morning or walking down the street or whatever, do you think about, I'm a guy, I'm a girl? How often do you ever think about your actual gender? And Beth looked at me and she said, what the hell are you talking about? I never think about it. And I said, that's our difference. I think about nothing else. I wake up in the morning thinking, damn, wrong again. When I was in middle school, I would pray every night before going to bed to wake up as a girl. I used to I had a recurring dream that I woke up as a girl one day. Sometimes it was a good story, sometimes it was bad, but everybody has good days and everybody has bad days, whether you're a guy or a girl. And so now we go back up to the vacation. So I come back from vacation and I find another therapist, because the one that I was going to was not in my network, in my medical network. So I was paying for these out of pocket. And as it turns out, it was a good thing that I switched, because the letters after her name weren't enough. You need certain letters after the name, and even today I don't know what certain letters are the important ones. So I switched over to somebody else, and Dr. Wilkie is my friend. Well, not my friend, she's my therapist. I consider her my friend because I tell her everything, and you tell your friends everything. So, and she will absolutely deny that she's my friend, and she really isn't my friend, she's my therapist. But I think of her as my friend because that's how I can open up to her. Anyway, so I went to her and did the same thing. I didn't tell her about what was really going on, and ultimately she said, just stop. This is what you got. And I said, okay, thanks. You're the second one to confirm that. And so she gave me some homework assignments, and one was to create a collage. Just create a collage of pictures, cut them out of magazines. Who has magazines? And that represent your pre-puberty life. So what did you do? Pick some events and just get pictures for them. So those of you who know me or know my family, we're overachievers. So I opened up Photoshop, and I spent hours and hours and hours digging through internet websites looking for pictures that represented a whole bunch of stuff. And I got a collage that's about the size of one of these large paintings on the wall. It was this big. And I went over to Staples and I printed it out, and I got some mat board, and I glued it onto this mat board, and I walk in and she says, what's that? And I said, well, you told me to create a collage. She said, nobody's ever done it before. And I'm like, well, you could have told me that. But what I had done before I got in there is I took yellow stickies and I stuck them over all of the pictures in the collage. And I said, what I'd like to do is to explain this collage to you, and instead of overwhelming you, I pulled one off at a time. So I pull off this one and this one and this one. And I'm telling her all these stories, and she's getting really into it. I mean, she's asking me, really personal questions about, why was a washing machine so interesting to me? I remember growing up when my mom was doing laundry that I would go down and open up the lid to the washing machine. And at those days, you could actually hold your finger into so that it would keep going. And I would stick a pencil in there, and I would be fascinated by how the washing machine washed clothes. Just one of those things I remember. I remember it was, they have glass doors on them now. Isn't that great? Anyway, I've actually never sat there and watched one of those. That would be interesting. But, and I used to watch my mom sew, and I used to just wish she would take the time to teach me to sew. And all I had to do was ask. She would have taught me. But I was too afraid to go back to that story at the beginning of, hey, was a mistake made? And now go out, So that one instant in life is what caused me to wait 50 years. And the one instant that got me to go over the border was, why aren't you so happy? So, and then that goes on. So I go through the collage, and at the end of the collage, in the middle, just before I was about to print this thing out, I had a blank spot in the middle. I'm like, I got to find something to put here. I was just scrolling. I asked Google, random pictures. Okay, now Google knows more about us than we know about ourselves, right? And one of the early pictures in what was in there was a picture of a jigsaw puzzle with a picture of the jigsaw piece in the middle that obviously didn't belong where it was. Caucasoodic, nailed with a bolt into the board to hold this jigsaw puzzle in piece. And I cut that out and stuck it in the middle. And I got to that picture and I pulled it off, and she's like, oh my God. I said, that's how I felt my whole life. I felt like a jigsaw puzzle piece that never really fit. Okay. So it was probably 2 weeks later that she finally said, so what's the next step? Are you done? Are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not okay. I need to do something. So we started talking about what it means to transition. So now you get into the nuts and bolts of what does it take to change from male to female or female to male. The process is similar, but the challenges are very different, as you might imagine. So over a little bit of while, one of the things that really concerned me, and it still does concern me, and my concerns actually are coming to fruition a little bit, and that is I hit the health lottery. If you look at all of my meds and all my blood work and everything about me, I am right down the middle on almost everything except for this darn Ronau syndrome that just drives me nuts. My fingers go numb. But other than that, my health is pretty darn good. So I go see my now new GP, Dr. Ettner, who I later find out his wife, Randy Ettner, wrote one of the foremost books on what medications to use for transition. I was like, okay, thank you, Dr. Wilkie, my therapist, for recommending Dr. Ettner. So I got to know Dr. Ettner, and I go in, and before he prescribes anything, he says, tell me about your life. And it was about 30 seconds, and he said, okay, you can stop. And pulled out, to get hormones in this country, I think it's the country, you only have to fill out a consent form. And the consent form says, yes, I know this is going to do things to my body. Yes, I know it's going to do good things. I know it's going to do bad things, and this is what it's going to do. And it's got a long list of, don't blame me if something goes wrong. So I go through and I sign it all, and he gives me 2 different prescriptions. One for a drug called spironolactone, which is a diuretic that when you look on page 3 of the possible side effects, probable side effects, it says blocks androgens. So testosterone is an androgen. That's what makes guys is testosterone. And so I started taking this thing called spironolactone at a very low level. And in the first 3 days of taking the Spiro, I went from an angry person. I was literally angry. Just imagine walking down the street and you're mad at half the population. I could be that person. I could be that person. I want to be that person. Okay? The jealousy turns to rage. It turns to anger. It's a terrible way to live. 3 days later, I felt great. It's like, this is fun. Not fun, but I feel good. I've never felt so good. This is what it feels like to be normal. So I was on just the Spiro, the anti-androgen, for March to May, 2 months. Then I started on the estrogen. The estrogen was very interesting. Those are injections with a needle that's about this big around and about that long, and it goes right there. And that started going, okay, now at this point, we got to start telling people, because there are going to be physical changes. I'm going to grow out my hair. Shall we say the girls are going to get bigger, okay, as time goes on. So we start telling friends and whatnot. One group of friends that we told, I expected it to be very supportive, and they weren't. And it was amongst the first people that we had told. And I'm thinking, this isn't good. If this group isn't going to be comfortable with it, what about all these other people that I'm not so sure about? So now I start worrying about society against me, my friends, my relatives. You know, because the only person that I talked to this about was my sister. Thank you for being much my supporter on that. And so on July 1st, 2016, so I started in May, so July 1st, so I'd taken probably 6 shots worth of this stuff. The doctor walks in looking at this chart, and I remember I love Dr. Etner. He's really funny. He walks in and says, "Oh, look, you're ovulating." Because as you ovulate, your estrogen levels go up and down and whatnot. And he said, okay, you are way above ovulating levels. So everything looks good for now. We'll check you again in 6 months. Or actually, it was probably every 6 weeks for a while there. And so my estrogen level was way up there. Now, one thing that trans people, trans female, me, compared to trans masculine, not me, we don't have this cyclical effect of the female cycle, okay? It's constant. Well, it ripples a little bit. I take a shot every Sunday morning, and so by Saturday morning, it's probably a little low, or Saturday night, it's probably a little low. But by Sunday morning, I shoot up again, and a couple hours, I'm fine. Now, as it turns out, just because I know this now, it takes about 2 weeks for it to get down low enough so I start feeling irritable and emotional and whatnot. So on July 1st, because of all these social pressures that I had, and Beth had, the night before, had said something about, I think we're going to have to sell the house. Okay, so all these things are starting to really cave in on me, and I feel like the world is against me. So I stop. I stop taking the Spiro. I stop taking the estrogen, and I feel okay. Now the cat's out of the bag to some people that I'm struggling with this, but at least it's not a general public announcement type of thing. So, so July 1st. So for those of you who are Anchor House people, you know what happens a week later. A week later, I'm going to get on my bicycle, and I'm going to bike from Manchester, New Hampshire, down to Trenton, New Jersey. That's through the mountains all through New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, through upstate New York or wherever we came through, and then we come down through the Poconos, and so up and down all these mountains with no hormones in me at all. No testosterone, because it takes a month or more for that to come back after the Spiro, and no estrogen. That was all eaten out about the day that we left on the trip. Okay, so I have nothing. I have no way to regenerate muscle. I have no way to just balance my emotions or anything. I remember on Wednesday on that trip, there was, funny things in life that you remember. I was biking along, and I take pictures. I like pictures. It was a farmhouse on the right that had carved pigs and just different animals out on the right side. And I stopped and took pictures. And something in those pictures, something in the scene set me off, and I just sat on the wall and cried. I couldn't go on. It was Wednesday. We're halfway through the ride, exactly 200 miles into the trip, and I just couldn't go on. One of the other riders that I was riding with a lot, and I don't want to call them out, but they know who they are, stopped by, and I rode with them for the next 300 miles. Just blindly sat right behind them and rode, because I just had to get to the end. I didn't care what was going on, just get me to the end. Things went downhill mentally for me a lot. By the middle of September, I had such a meltdown that my employer said, why don't you take some time off and we'll see if you're going to be invited back to work. I have never been lower in my life. Now, one of the statistics that I talk about here is an important one. And if you remember a couple of things about this one, remember this one. 42% of people that are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, because again, nobody diagnoses with transgender, 42%, almost half, attempt suicide. Not think about it, attempt it. Have actually been in the hospital because of it. Okay, half. I am not in that half because when I was going to, that day I didn't expect to come home that day. Somebody noticed the signs and stuck with me again and got me through the day. So it's very serious when somebody comes out to you and talks to you about this condition. Watch them very closely, especially if they stop transition, because it's like getting hit by a truck. It's unbelievable. All right, that was the saddest part of my life. That one weekend was terrible. I was invited back to work. I've been a happy employee ever since, because the next day after I was told to stay home, I started back up on the Spiro, and I started back up on the estrogen. A month later, I needed to see the doctor, make sure everything was okay, and so we worked out a plan. I don't do anything without my doctor except for the stopping, and he would have said, don't do that, and I wish I'd called him ahead of time. But so on November 1st, I restarted the estrogen, and I have not looked back since. So this is December, so that was exactly 2 years and a month ago. So 25 months ago is when I started this transition, really. So some of you knew me before, and so everything that you see here now has happened, in 2 years, basically, on hormones and a little bit of surgical help here and there. So since all of this has started, I came out at work. Coming out at work was really interesting. So a lot of people are concerned about how do you tell your oh my God, you could be fired for this. I don't know the stats because they change on occasion, but I believe the number is there are 19 states in this country, the United States of America, there are 19 of them, that if you come out in the LGBT community, your boss can say, oh, you're fired, goodbye, and you have no recourse. Nothing. In Illinois, you're quite protected. So I work in Illinois. I work in Chicago. So I am quite protected. So I wasn't worried about that. I also wasn't worried about my company. I work for a large financial institution. The bank has the reputation of being called the Gray Lady of LaSalle Street, because we've been around for 130 years. We're worth a couple $1 trillion, and you've never heard of us. We're very subtle, behind-the-scenes bank. So HR knew what was going on, because I had to tell them what was going on, that they allowed me to come back. I said I was off my meds. They said, well, don't do that again. Come back. I said, okay. So then I had to work with HR to come up with a plan as what am I going to tell everybody else? I said, okay, look. It goes on and on and on, but after a while, it got to the point where, okay, I can't hide some of these things anymore. I got to tell everybody. So I go to my HR guy and I say, okay, Mike, do me a favor. On February 20th, go to the CTO's meeting, which he does every day, which CTO and all of his direct reports. Now, I've been with the bank for 30 years in the technology department. So I know all the people that are in the CTO's staff meeting. I know these people. I've worked with them forever. I wish I was a fly on the wall when it was announced. I really do. But I got emails for a week from people saying, congratulations. That takes courage. And all these positive messages. And it was such a relief. And I tell this story to other people, and some people the story was, oh really, I got fired. They immediately got demoted. That like a week later they were demoted, and then about a month after that they were let go entirely, which is sad. I actually told somebody in an elevator, I had an elevator spiel. The story is, look, have you ever heard of gender dysphoria? And only one person ever had, and they were already in the LGBT community. So that was an easy conversation. But one person said, yeah, I think so. And I said, and I always said the same story. It's the clinical diagnosis for people who are transgender. And I have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So I never told anybody that I was transgender. I let them make that connection, okay? It's not a choice. I have been diagnosed by 3 different doctors that I have something called gender dysphoria. What is the prescribed methodology for coming over, getting over this condition? And the answer is hormones, the opposite side. They have side effects. The side effects is you transition. So that's where I am. I have a condition called gender dysphoria, and I am taking drugs, specifically estrogen and Spiro, and those 2 together make me feel right. And that is pretty much my story. Let me finish this graph. Okay. So the Spiro did that to me. And over time, it's now like this. So one thing that I have decided is, if you go back to a question I asked 10 or 15 minutes ago, is what does it feel like to be a woman, or what does it feel like to be a guy, or how often do you think about your gender? So I went from thinking about it all the time to I don't think about it at all anymore. It's amazing. It's just not in my, I know what it is to think about it. I don't think about it.
Speaking of your wife
Yeah.
and extrapolate that to your family,
Mm-hmm.
how did you approach explaining to your children what you were going through, and how have they responded?
Okay, so I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. They are 27, 29, 26, 28, right in that area. And I told my son, literally over beer and hamburgers at a restaurant in Chicago, because he was working in Chicago, I was working in Chicago. We got together for lunch one day. And his reaction was interesting. He's apt to see this video, and I don't know if he remembers it like this, but basically we talked about it for about 30 seconds, and then how about them Bears? It really was. It was a non-event. Younger kids, anybody under the age of 30, this is a non-issue. This issue is for people 30 and up in most cases. Okay. My daughter is another story. I don't know because I didn't tell her. That is one of the 2 major mistakes that I made during transition was I didn't tell her. My wife did. And I don't know how that conversation went. I don't know how she feels about any of this. She is cordial with me. She comes and, we talk, whatever. So, but we were never, like that. So, but it's fine. It's fine. My parents are both still alive. They're down in Tampa, or just outside of Tampa. And their reaction was as I had expected to be, and that was, oh, I think I need to do some research as to what this is all about. And they have accepted me since that day, basically. Now, pronouns, the two things that I didn't talk about, and I just noticed as I went through these, there are 2 things that I need to talk about, if you don't mind. One is pronoun usage, okay? So if you passed me on the street, I'm hoping that you would think female, and you would use female pronouns. There she goes. This is hers, right? And I would expect that back. Now, some people I've known for 50 years, and they make a mistake, and I just let it go. I do now. When I first started, I would correct them. I don't correct anybody anymore. But if you are an ally, and you're in a conversation, a group conversation with 1 or 2 more people, and the conversation goes like this, okay? Well, Denise does this, and he lives there. Your reaction to that should be nothing more than, oh, I guess she does.
Exactly.
Don't point out that there was a mistake made. Don't try to emphasize the she or her pronoun or whichever direction that you're going. Just a simple that. The other thing, and this has happened to me 3 times, and it hadn't happened ever, and it happened to me 3 times this week. All right, this week was literally in the last 7 days. Somebody had mispronounced me, and they caught it themselves and made a big deal out of it. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry. It's like, it's fine. Let's go on. I changed the subject. They came back to it. I get an email the next day apologizing. Okay, so what that does is it just re-emphasizes my maleness to me. Stop it! Just don't do that. Just, sorry, and go on. Don't even say sorry. Just keep going. I mean, you could say sorry, but nothing more than that, please. Okay, so there's this chart that I found that indicates the number of people over time, and you can see that the number of, it's I don't know, 0.01%. Well, I don't know what the units are over here. It doesn't matter. But that there's a jump in the number of people, and you would consider being transgender or whatever. And you think, okay, what happened in society between these 2 endpoints, right? Something happened, or actually it would have happened closer to here. Why all of a sudden is there a jump? You're much more aware. You hear it in the news now. You hear it wherever. What happened? What's going on? Okay, in 1976, you have Renee Richards, which, by the way, I didn't talk about, but I read every single news story that ever existed on Renee Richards when I was 12. Okay? Actually, no, I was 12, 74, 75, 76. You might think, okay, maybe this is Caitlyn Jenner, right? So whatever. And then on this nice chart, on this nice thing, and I go to the next slide, and I say, oh, wait, I got these slides mixed up. This is 1920. I just make that bigger so it comes up on the picture. 1927. And this is the number of people left-handed. Because in 1927, being left-handed was changed from an abnormality to just what you are. Okay? And that's the same graph that you would picture in your mind, whether it's reality or not. We don't have enough time to tell about this. But this is what you kind of think is the trans world, is that, when I was 52, if you'd asked me, was I transgender? I says, hell no. If you asked me at 53 and a half, I was like, hell yes. So, that's where the challenge is. It's diagnosis and availability of information and stigma. One of the other questions was I asked my therapist, why now? Why all of a sudden can I not take this? What is it that did it? And the answer is, well, you're ready now. I mean, I had 2 kids. I got them through school. They're out. They're on their own. I just delayed it by going back to getting my master's degree, or else I would have started this 4 years sooner. So going back, if somebody comes out to you, what do you do? Okay. So I thought about this. I've thought a lot and hard about this. What do I wish people had done when I first started coming out? And the answer is the first thing you do is you give them a hug. If you're in a situation and if you know this person well enough, they're coming out to you, right? Give them a hug. Say, I love you. I support you. Be very positive. Okay? So that's number 1. Listen to what they're saying and talk with them. Don't talk to them. Don't talk at them, and let them talk. Trust me, they have a lot to say. Okay? And the one thing you should never do is ask a question that starts, have you thought about? Have you? Oh, that's even worse. Is it a phase? No, in the have you thought about scenario, okay? I've been thinking about this for 50 years. Half of a century, 5 decades I've been thinking about this. Yes, I have thought about this. Now, there are some questions that people have never asked that I had not thought about, but that's not a, have you thought about your kids? No, that's a good question, which does happen. I actually got that question. Have you thought about your kids and your family? No, of course I have. Why do you think it took me so long? Okay, so that's the important part. Stay calm and stay positive. Okay, so stay calm and positive. All right. and help them find a gender therapist. With the Psychology Today is where I went, and I had great success with both therapists. I loved them both. Okay, so that's in the short term. That's in the day, like in the instant, maybe the days ahead. Okay. In the weeks and months immediately following that, I guarantee you they are not sleeping well. I slept one night in 3. I would be up 2 nights solid straight. And then on the 3rd night, just sheer exhaustion, I would probably just pass out on the bed with clothes on and everything, just because I hadn't slept in 2 days. So they're not sleeping, so give them a break right away, that they're not going to be thinking about whatever you want them to be thinking about. Take them to lunch. Let them talk. Say, what's up? Good and bad. What good happened this week? What bad happened this week? Try to always be positive. The one thing that I've done is removed all negativity in my life to the point where I actually don't use, or I try not to use, even there I just did it, I use only positive words in when I send an email. I don't say, you can't do this. I'd say, let's do it this way, or whatever. I've removed all negativity. So try to do that with them, and they will, they'll feel that. It's subtle. They're subtle. This is one that I just added recently, and I showed the slide to somebody, and they said, ooh, that's a good one. And that was, if you are in the gender to which they are transitioning, take them shopping. Okay? So, okay. And then the last thing is take them to lunch. Remember, this is the only thing on their mind. Just talk to them about it. And then in the long term, don't ghost them. If you know that term is, just be their friends. Okay. I think we are definitely way over time. I don't know what time it is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.